Soft. Emotional music fades in, sound of distant rain or slow footsteps echoing. Voiceover. There comes a moment when the world around you goes quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind that hurts. The kind that makes your chest heavy, your eyes tired, your heart uncertain if it can take one more day. You look around and everything you once believed in feels far away, blurry, almost gone. Maybe you've been there staring at the ceiling late at night, wondering if all your effort even matters. You tell yourself to be strong, but your own thoughts don't listen. Hope. It feels like a word made for other people. Not for you. Not anymore. Short pause. Sound of breath, but still. Here you are. Listening. Breathing. Maybe that means something. Maybe that means you haven't given up just yet. Visuals. Dim light. Slow motion shots of hands dropping a pen, a rain-soaked street, a shadowed room. No faces shown, only moments. Voiceover. There was a time when everything felt like it was falling apart. The plans you made, the dreams you chased, they all slipped through your fingers like water. You tried to hold on, but the harder you tried, the faster everything faded. Each morning felt heavier than the last. You woke up not because you wanted to, but because you had to. The same routine, the same silence, the same tired eyes staring back at you in the mirror. You told yourself it's just a phase, but deep inside, you wondered if maybe this was it. Maybe this was all that was left. Music swells slightly. Soft piano notes. You watched people move forward, smiling, achieving, living while you stood still, lost in a fog that wouldn't lift. It wasn't jealousy. It was confusion. Why can't I feel that way anymore? You whispered to yourself, but there was no answer. Only that dull ache that lives somewhere between your ribs and your heart. Days turned into nights, and nights turned into weeks. You stopped expecting anything to change. You started to hide your pain behind fake smiles, quiet nods, and empty words like "I'm fine," but you weren't. You were tired, not of life, but of feeling like you were losing yourself in it. Visual cue, close-up of a hand releasing, small object, maybe a keychain, photo or paper, symbolizing letting go, and maybe the scariest part wasn't the pain itself. It was the silence after it. The emptiness that came when there was nothing left to fight for. You looked around and realized no one could see it. Not the way you felt, not the way you broke inside. The world kept spinning, and you kept pretending. Music fades lower. Heartbeat sound effect begins softly. You began to wonder if hope was just another lie. Story people tell themselves to make the darkness feel smaller. You wanted to believe it was real. But how could you, when all you could see was the dark? Long pause. Then, a soft inhale. But somewhere, in that endless silence, something small refused to die. A voice faint, but alive, whispering, "Hold on." You didn't know why. You didn't know how. But even then, you never gave up hope. Visuals. A half-lit room. Papers scattered on the floor. A cup slowly tipping over. A hand trembling in the dark. The sound of distant thunder or a faint heartbeat. No faces, only moments. Voiceover. It doesn't happen all at once. The fall, it comes quietly. One missed chance. One closed door. One small disappointment that you tell yourself doesn't matter. Until one day, it does. You start losing little pieces of yourself. First, your smile. Then your energy. Then your faith in the things that once made your heart feel alive. You tell yourself it's fine. I'll try again tomorrow. But tomorrow keeps moving further away. Sound. Clock ticking slowly. Echoing, you begin to notice how heavy silence feels. How loud your thoughts become when there's no one around to drown them out. The world doesn't shout at you. It whispers, "You're not enough." That whisper hurts more than any scream ever could. Visual cue. Someone sitting on the floor. Their hands gripping a piece of paper that slowly crumples. Light flickers like a dying candle. Closing parenthesis. There were days when you stared at the wall for hours, your mind racing and blank at the same time. You wanted to cry, but the tears didn't come. You wanted to scream, but your voice felt locked behind a wall too high to climb. It wasn't just sadness. It was something deeper, a quiet breaking. The kind that no one sees because you've become so good at hiding it. You laughed at jokes, smiled for pictures, but inside, you were sinking. And the worst part? You couldn't explain why. Music deepens, soft piano, low strings. You started questioning everything. Why didn't it work? Why do I keep trying if it always ends the same? The dreams you once held so tightly began to fade, like ink washed away by rain. Each failure cut a little deeper, till you stopped feeling the sting, you just felt empty. There were nights when you wanted to give up, not because you were weak, but because you were tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of hoping. Tired of believing that things would change. Visual cue. A window in the rain. One drop racing down the glass as the camera follows it, symbolic of a tear, but even then, deep inside that darkness, something still flickered, faint, fragile, but real. A heartbeat. A small reminder that maybe, just maybe, your story wasn't finished yet. You didn't know it then, but that quiet heartbeat was hope. And even when everything else fell apart, it stayed, waiting, watching, believing in you. When you couldn't believe in yourself, music fades to a soft hum, symbolizing the slow return of life. Visuals. Dawn light creeping through curtains. A single candle flickers. A hand reaches for a notebook that's been closed for too long. A gentle breeze moves through an open window. Voiceover. It didn't happen in some grand, magical way. There was no sign, no miracle, no sudden rush of light. It was quiet. Almost too quiet to notice. But something changed. Maybe it was the way the morning light touched the wall, softer than you remembered. Maybe it was the sound of your own breath, steady, alive. Or maybe it was just the tiniest thought that whispered, "What if?" I tried again. Music begins softly, a single piano note repeating like a heartbeat. You didn't rise with confidence that day. You didn't feel strong or brave. You just moved. One small step. One tiny act of courage that no one saw. Odd. But that changed everything. Maybe you picked up the phone you'd stopped answering. Maybe you cleaned your room, wrote a single line, stepped outside after days of hiding. It didn't feel like much, but deep down, it was everything. Because it meant you hadn't given up. Visual cue. The rain has stopped. Drops still cling to the window, but sunlight begins to break through. That's how hope works. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It just waits patiently, quietly for the moment you're ready to believe again. You started noticing little things. The smell of coffee in the morning, the warmth of sunlight on your hands. The way the world didn't look as heavy as before. For the first time in a long time, your chest didn't feel as tight. Your heart, though still healing, remembered how to beat without fear. Sound, gentle wind. Birds faintly in the distance. It was strange how something so small could feel so powerful. That tiny spark of hope. It wasn't a rescue, but it was a reminder. A whisper that said, "You're still here. You still matter." You realize that healing doesn't always begin with strength. Sometimes it starts with surrender, the moment you stop fighting the pain and simply let yourself feel it. The moment you let light touch the places you've kept in shadow. Visual cue, a match being struck in slow motion. Flame glowing brighter. And maybe, just maybe, that's all hope ever is. A light that refuses to die even when everything else has. You didn't know it yet, but that tiny spark was the beginning of your comeback. The start of a new chapter written not in perfection, but in courage. Music rises, gentle piano turning warmer, fuller, because for the first time in forever, you didn't turn away from the light. You reached for it, and it reached back. Visuals, morning light spilling onto a desk, a pair of worn-out shoes being tied, a notebook opening to a blank page, a deep breath before a quiet walk outside. Everything is slow, calm, intentional, closing, parenthesis, voiceover. Starting over isn't loud. It doesn't come with applause or cheering crowds. It's quiet, almost invisible. It's the sound of a breath before sunrise. It's the tremble in your hands when you decide to try again. You didn't wake up one morning and feel strong. You just got tired of being stuck. So you took one step, unsure, but real, and then another. And somehow, that's how the climb began. Music, gentle guitar, or soft piano, slow rhythm symbolizing steady motion. You began doing little things that once felt impossible. Getting out of bed without hating the day. Smiling at someone, even when your heart still felt heavy. Writing a few words, even if they didn't make sense yet. They were small moments, tiny, fragile victories, but each one mattered. Because for every small step you took, the darkness moved one step further away. Visual cue. A close-up of shoes walking through dirt that slowly becomes grass. Then a path. You learn something beautiful. Progress isn't about how far you've come. It's about how many times you chose not to quit. Some days you stumbled. Some days you fell. But this time, you got back up. Not because it was easy, but because something inside whispered, keep going. Sound, soft breathing, rhythm of footsteps. You stopped waiting for the world to understand you. You stopped comparing your pace to others. You started listening to your own heartbeat, the same one that survived every fall. Every heartbreak, every night you thought you wouldn't make it through. That heartbeat became your drum. And with every beat, you climbed a little higher. Visual cue. A hand brushing dust off a notebook. A small plant growing in sunlight. Wind lifting loose pages, you began to see the beauty in effort itself. How healing hides in routine. How strength grows quietly in the background. You realized it wasn't about reaching the top. It was about proving to yourself that you could move, even when standing still felt safer. Music builds, steady, emotional rise. You didn't rush. You didn't run. You walked, step by step, with your scars, your lessons, your fragile hope. And though no one noticed it, something extraordinary was happening inside you. You were rebuilding. You were becoming. You were learning how to live again, not as who you were, but as who you were meant to be. Visual. The camera tilts upward, light shining through trees, sky opening wider. Fade to soft golden glow, because sometimes strength doesn't roar. Sometimes it just whispers, one more step. Visuals, wind picking up. Clouds rolling in. Papers scatter across a desk. A candle flickers but doesn't go out. Sound of rain beginning softly, then growing heavier. Voiceover. You thought the worst was behind you. You thought the sky had cleared for good. But life has a strange way of testing the ones who dare to rise. The storm came back. Not the same one. This one was quieter, sharper. It didn't knock you down with noise. It whispered again, see? You're still not enough. Sound. Thunder rumbles low in the background, then fades into silence. And suddenly, you felt it, that old fear crawling back under your skin. The doubt, the weight, the noise in your head that you thought you'd left behind. Everything you rebuilt began to tremble. You dropped what you were holding. You wanted to scream. Why again? Haven't I fought enough? Visual cue. A hand clenches into a fist, then slowly opens as rain hits it. Camera focuses on raindrops on skin, but this time, something was different. You didn't run. You didn't hide behind the walls you used to build. You stood there, soaked, shaking, but standing, because you'd learned something from the first fall. You'd learned that storms don't always come to destroy you. Sometimes they come to remind you of how far you've already climbed. Music, deep, slow, cello, or piano chords. Build slowly. The rain fell harder. The world grew heavy again. But inside, that same flicker, that tiny light you thought would fade, burned brighter than before. It whispered back to the storm, not this time. And though your hands trembled, you kept going. You wiped the tears, tightened your grip, and faced the noise head on. You weren't fearless, but you were brave. And that made all the difference. Visual cue. A person walking against strong wind, jacket flapping, hands pushing forward. The camera never shows their face. Pain returned, yes, but now you knew it couldn't break you. Disappointment came again, but now you knew it wouldn't define you, because you'd already seen what happens when everything falls apart, and you survived that. Music swells, blending thunder with soft piano, chaos meeting calm. You understood something powerful that day. Hope isn't what keeps you safe from storms. Hope is what teaches you to dance in the rain. And so you walked through it, not untouched, not unhurt, but unbroken. Every drop of rain became a reminder. You're still here, still breathing, still trying. Visual cue. The storm begins to fade. Light glows faintly in the distance. Reflecting on wet ground. When the sky finally cleared, you didn't look the same because you weren't. You were stronger, softer, wiser. You'd faced the storm again. And this time, you didn't just survive it, you owned it. Visuals. The storm clouds drift away. Sunlight spills across puddles. A drop of water slides off a leaf. The sound of rain fades, replaced by calm wind and distant birds. The world looks washed, new. Voiceover. The storm passed. Not suddenly, but slowly, like a wound learning how to close. The air was still heavy, but you could breathe again. You looked around, and for the first time in a long while, the world didn't look cruel. It looked alive. You didn't feel like the same person anymore, and maybe that was the point. The pain had changed you, shaped you, softened you in ways you never expected. But it also built you stronger, steadier, more real. Visual cue. A pair of hands wiping rain from a window. Light pours in and warms the fingers. You began to see beauty in things you used to ignore. The warmth of morning light. The rhythm of your own steps. The way the wind brushed against your face like a gentle reminder. You made it. Every scar had a story now. Every tear had a purpose. They weren't signs of weakness anymore. They were proof that you had lived, that you had fought, that you had not given up. Music, slow rise, soft piano, layered with light strings. Emotionally uplifting, you realize something profound. Peace doesn't come when everything is perfect. It comes when you learn to live fully, even when things aren't single quotes. And so you smiled, not because life was suddenly easy, but because you had finally understood that happiness isn't the absence of pain, it's the courage to keep shining through it. Visuals. Slow motion of sunlight reflecting on water. Leaves moving in gentle wind. The world feels calm and alive. You looked back at the path behind you, all the nights you thought you'd never survive. All the days you dragged yourself forward with nothing but stubborn faith. And now, you stood there, still breathing, still fighting, still you. That's when it hit you. Hope was never something you lost. It was something you carried all along, hidden deep inside. Waiting for the moment you'd notice it again, music builds, warm. Cinematic crescendo. You lifted your head, and the light found your face, not to blind you, but to remind you that you'd earned this sunrise. The storm didn't break you. It revealed you. It peeled away everything false and left only what was true, your strength, your courage, your heart. Visual cue. The camera pans upward to a clear blue sky. A hand reaches out toward the sunlight, still trembling. But steady, you realized you were never fighting to go back to who you were. You were becoming someone new, someone unshakable, someone free. Music softens, fades into golden quiet. Because in the end, it wasn't luck that saved you. It wasn't rescue. It was you, the one who refused to give up. The one who kept believing, even when believing hurt. You never gave up hope. And that hope became your light. Visuals.com waves touching the shore. A candle burning softly. A journal closing. The world bathed in golden light, peaceful, still. No faces, only moments. Voiceover. Now, when you look back, it almost feels like another lifetime. The darkness, the pain, the long nights where you questioned everything, they don't hurt the same anymore. They've turned into memories, quiet echoes that remind you how far you've come. You used to wonder if the pain would ever end. But now you see it wasn't the pain that ended. It was you who changed inside it. Soft music, ambient piano, and faint strings, slow and warm. You don't walk with the same fear anymore. You don't chase perfection or answers. You move gently now, slower, wiser, at peace, with not knowing everything. You've learned that life doesn't owe you clarity. It only asks you to keep believing, even when the path is dim. Visual cue, a cup of coffee steaming by a window. A notebook half filled with writing. Morning light pouring in. You understand something now? That hope was never about pretending everything's fine. Hope was the strength to say, I'll try again tomorrow, even when your hands were shaking. It was the courage to stay, to breathe, to love, even when your heart was tired. And that is what saved you. Music swells softly, like a heartbeat finding its rhythm again. The world hasn't stopped throwing storms your way, but you've stopped fearing the rain. You've stopped asking, why me? And started whispering, I can handle this, because you've seen what you're made of, not through victory, but through survival. Visual cue. A person standing at sunrise, back to the camera. The wind moves through their hair. The sky shifts from gold to blue. You carry scars now, but they don't weigh you down. They shine like reminders of everything you endured. Every tear, every ache, every quiet night that almost broke you. It all built you. Music fades to a calm, soft hum. And as you stand in the light, you finally understand hope was never something you found out there. It was inside you all along, waiting, breathing, believing. You never gave up hope. And because of that, the story didn't end where you thought it would. Pause. Soft breeze sound. Fade to silence. Voice over final line, gentle. Hope didn't save you. You saved yourself by never letting go of it. Visual fade to black. Title appears slowly. You never gave up hope.